The invasion of Normandy, June 6, 1944. 6:30 a.m. The coast of Normandy, France. Through the pre-dawn darkness, the largest amphibious invasion in human history begins. 156,000 Allied soldiers, 5,000 ships, and 11,000 aircraft converge on 50 miles of French coastline. The codename, Operation Overlord. This is the story of the 24 hours that changed the course of World War II and the world. The stakes. By the spring of 1944, Nazi Germany had occupied France for 4 years. Adolf Hitler's Atlantic Wall, a vast network of bunkers, gun emplacements, and obstacles, stretched along the entire coast, defended by 58 German divisions. The Soviet Union was bleeding in the east, desperately calling for the Western Allies to open a second front. Britain had endured years of bombing and blockade, and in America, a generation of young men had been training for this moment. Supreme Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower faced an impossible decision. The invasion required specific conditions: a full moon for airborne operations, low tide to expose beach obstacles, and calm seas for the crossing. These conditions aligned for only a few days each month. The original date, June 5th, brought terrible weather. Eisenhower postponed. On the evening of June 5th, his chief meteorologist predicted a brief break in the storms. Eisenhower had minutes to decide. He looked at his commanders and said simply, "Okay, let's go." The fate of millions now rested on one day. The airborne assault shortly after midnight, the invasion began. Not on the beaches, but in the sky. 13,000 American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions boarded C-47 transport planes in England. Their mission: drop behind enemy lines, secure key bridges and causeways, and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. At 1:30 a.m., the drops began, but almost immediately the plan unraveled. Cloud cover scattered the formations. Anti-aircraft fire tore through the sky. Paratroopers landed miles from their targets, some in flooded marshes, some in trees, many alone and disoriented in enemy territory. Private John Steele of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment caught his parachute on the church steeple in Sainte-Mère-Église. He hung there for 2 hours, playing dead as German soldiers fought American paratroopers in the streets below. Despite the chaos, small groups of paratroopers accomplished their objectives through sheer determination. They cut communication lines, ambushed German patrols, and created enough confusion that German commanders couldn't determine where the main attack would fall. British and Canadian airborne forces seized Pegasus Bridge and the Merville Battery, securing the eastern flank of the invasion. By dawn, the airborne troops had suffered heavy casualties, but they had succeeded in their essential task: creating chaos behind enemy lines. The naval bombardment. As the first light broke over the English Channel, the largest armada ever assembled came into view. Visual, naval vessels, aerial shots of the invasion fleet. 5,000 ships stretched across the horizon, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and thousands of landing craft. 7 battleships and 23 cruisers moved into position, their massive guns trained on the German fortifications. At 5:50 a.m., the bombardment began. The roar was heard across the channel. Thousands of tons of high-explosive shells slammed into the Atlantic Wall. The beach defenses disappeared in clouds of smoke and dust. But the bombardment had a critical flaw. Fearful of hitting their own landing craft, many ships fired too far inland. Much of Hitler's Atlantic Wall remained intact, waiting for the men in the landing craft now racing toward shore. The German defenders, stunned but not destroyed, moved to their positions. The beaches. 5 beaches, 5 code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave hit the shore. At Utah Beach, the westernmost landing, a navigation error turned into a stroke of luck. The 4th Infantry Division landed nearly a mile off target, in a lightly defended area. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the former president, made the decision on the spot. "We'll start the war from right here." Utah Beach cost fewer than 200 casualties. At Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, British and Canadian forces faced stiff resistance, but pushed inland by afternoon, linking with the airborne troops. But at Omaha Beach, the invasion nearly failed. The 29th and 1st Infantry Divisions faced the strongest German defenses. The preliminary bombardment had missed. The tide was wrong. 27 of 32 amphibious tanks sank in the rough seas. As the landing craft ramps dropped, German machine guns opened fire from the cliffs above. Men fell before reaching the sand. Those who made it to the beach found themselves pinned down against the seawall, unable to advance or retreat. For 3 hours, the outcome hung in the balance. Dead and wounded covered the waterline. Officers fell. Radio communications broke down. On the command ship offshore, General Omar Bradley considered evacuating Omaha Beach entirely. Then, small groups of soldiers, often led by junior officers and sergeants, began to move. They blew gaps in the wire. They scaled the cliffs. They assaulted the German bunkers with grenades and rifles. Slowly, yard by yard, American soldiers pushed inland. By nightfall, Omaha Beach was secured, at the cost of over 2,000 casualties. The German response. In his headquarters near Paris, German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was absent, home in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. He had gambled that the weather was too poor for an invasion. When news of the landings reached German high command, confusion reigned. Hitler's staff refused to wake him. When he finally learned of the invasion, Hitler was convinced it was a diversion, that the real attack would come at Calais, 150 miles northeast. He refused to release the panzer divisions held in reserve. By the time German armor moved toward Normandy, Allied air superiority had turned the roads into killing zones. The German response was fragmented, delayed, and ultimately too late. Securing the beachhead by midnight on June 6th, 156,000 Allied soldiers had landed in France. The beachhead was established, though smaller than planned. The 5 beaches had not linked up. In some places, Allied forces held just a mile of French soil, but they held, and they would not be pushed back into the sea. The cost was severe. Allied casualties numbered over 10,000, 4,000 confirmed dead. German casualties are estimated at between 4,000 and 9,000. Entire units had been decimated. Families back home would soon receive telegrams. The liberation of Europe would take 11 more months of brutal fighting. But on June 6, 1944, the outcome of World War II shifted. Hitler's fortress Europe had been breached. The beginning of the end had begun. General Eisenhower carried a note in his pocket that day, a message he would release if the invasion failed, taking full responsibility for the defeat. He never had to use it. Today, above Omaha Beach, 9,000 white crosses and stars of David mark the graves of Americans who never came home. Similar cemeteries honor British, Canadian, and Allied dead across Normandy. The veterans of D-Day are now in their 90s and hundreds. Each year, fewer return to these beaches, but their legacy remains, carved in stone, written in history, and alive in the free world they fought to preserve. Eisenhower later wrote, "Every man who set foot on Omaha Beach that day was a hero." On June 6, 1944, 156,000 men crossed the English Channel. They came as soldiers, they fought as heroes, and they changed the world forever.